and some of you are even listening to the Chelsea Fancast, and we are delighted to be joined by a great old friend of mine, football writer Rob Shepherd, who has been entertaining us.
Shepherd.
Or as he's known in the East End, Robert Job, or in Liverpool, Robert Job even, probably.
Yeah,
but
right.
It's great to see you, mate, because we've had you on the show before, but never kind of as you. We had you on as a more kind of professional kind of media capacity. Remember the press show we did?
Yes, indeed.
So it's nice to get you on here properly, I think. So thank you.
Down and dirty with
Down
the
and
kids.
dirty with the kids, with the youth, mate.
Yeah, the youth.
With the youth.
Yeah.
Now, first things first, Rob. How did you get into football journalism? I mean, a lot of people that we know are very keen on knowing how that works. So how did you get into it?
Well, it was one of those things. I was in the Boys Brigade, and.
Was that also known as the Academy? West Ham's Academy.
I was a decent little footballer, and I was also in the Boys Brigade. And one of the guys in the Boys Brigade, a few years older, his dad was a photographer at the Mirror, and he was doing some messenger work for a company called Haters. In those days, we used to plug in telephones, and read the reports over for the reporters from their typewriters. So I got a job as a messenger when I was about 15, 16, and I balanced that with playing football. But when I left school, I got a job working in the agency off Fleet Street after my A-levels, and I combined that with playing football. When that football ended, when I was about 19, 20, I took a full-time job and progressed from there. So I learned it really from the street, and from the old school coffee tea boy route, but from a very early age.
Not the iPad generation. This was like notebooks and shorthand, right?
Yeah, well, my form of shorthand anyway. But those were the days where you could turn up to a training ground and interview a player on a Tuesday, just if you made the effort to go there. And it was a different world. In a lot of ways it was better. You got to know the players, and I was quite well. I made a lot of good in those days it was about contacts and knowing people. Used to get heads up on a story. I was an okay writer, developed that a bit, developed my craft, but I learnt it from the base level, and that's how I got into it really. But I had a passion for football always, even though I grew up supporting West Ham, but our family was a football family beyond just supporting one team. So we had books in the house of John Haynes and Len Shackleton, so I grew up with the whole philosophy of football.
Now you kind of, after that kind of beginning, you scale the heights of football journalism, really, and I suppose for any
plumb the depths as well.
Well, you can't really have one without the other, can you? But
as Rodney Marsh always says, you can't have a rainbow without the rain.
There we go. Good old Rodney, very poetic. Now, talking of the heights and the lows all in one go, I think as a football reporter, it doesn't really get better than covering a World Cup.
Exactly.
But on the other hand, it can have its problems. There's a very famous story about you and Sir Bobby Robson, or Bobby as he was in those days.
It was the World Cup Italian '90 was my first World Cup I covered, and I was banned for the first 8 days because the paper had said he should be sent to the Tower of London for quitting the England job before the tournament. A story I actually broke, which was a good story, but it all got out of control.
It wasn't your story, was it?
That he was quitting the England job, yes.
Yeah,
but not that he should be sent to the Tower of London. No, I didn't say that.
Because those days it was like, the front pages would basically screw the England manager, and the back pages would be very careful because you needed the access.
The news reporters were called the Rottweilers, the Rotters, because they were either. It was either that World Cup the players were caught in flagrante with one of the hostesses, so that was front page news. Bobby Robson was news,
is it flagrante in Italy?
It's an Italian word. I've got a few more Italian words, Latin phrases, if you wish to know. But I don't think I think it's a bit early for that.
All right.
But it was a very difficult tournament to cover. Then a fantastic one.
Yeah.
And of course, it was a whole gamut of emotions from A to Z. It really was, culminating on the last night at Stadio del Alpi, doing the rewrite, completely drained.
This is the England
semi-final. Couldn't believe that we'd not got there, and didn't believe that we would ever get there at the start because they drew with Ireland. It was rubbish. And I always remember getting down to the bottom of the stairs, and the first person I bumped into was Bobby Moore, and he'd been working for Capital Radio during that tournament. I'd got shared a few sherbets with him, and Bobby said, Mr. Bobby, I should say, Mr. Moore said, "Don't worry, son." He was always holding the customary half a lager. "Don't worry, son. We'll be back in 4 years' time." And of course, we weren't. Graham Taylor messed it up, which is a story that I'm quite close to. And unfortunately, Bobby wasn't either, because he died 3 years later, God rest his soul. And that's 20 years ago now, just over 20 years ago. It's February.
It's the last time, 96 we were relatively good. Did you cover the 96 tournament?
Yeah, I was It was very close to that, really, because at the time I was working for the Daily Mail, as they had their offices in Kensington, and it's quite convenient because Terry Venables, who was England manager, had his nightclub at the bottom of our building. So I tended to spend Scribes. I tended to spend most afternoons in the lead up to that European Championship with a few glasses of champagne and salt and pepper pots, deciding on what free kick tactics would be used or not. It was quite a good tournament to cover.
That's where Benitez learnt it from. Apparently, he was very good with the salt and pepper pots.
Yeah, and the tomato ketchup.
Yeah, not enough mustard.
No mustard.
No, that's right. No. Now, the Germany-England match was the best match you've ever covered. I think you've said this on record before. Now, one of the great things about that tournament, of course, was it was where Gaza really, came to the fore and became a national hero and all the rest of it. Yeah. You've got a great story about Gaza, which kind of proves also how skillful he was.
There's a couple of. I mean, if you're talking about the year before, he played for England B in the warm up. He was doing a warm up and he spotted a brass band playing, so he thought he'd have a bit of fun, and he basically chipped the ball not only into the band but down the end of a tuba, which actually slammed straight into the guy's face, and I think he might have lost a couple of teeth. But I tell you also, the day after England had drawn 0-0 at Holland, the team were actually staying in a lesser hotel to us in Sardinia, and the following day Robson had let them have a day off. This is the middle of a World Cup, and the players had come, and some of them had come to where the press was staying. We had a drinking session with Brian Robson, Chris Waddle and Terry Butcher, me and 3 other journalists. I mean, when I say a drinking session, had to go back to the minibar to keep it going while the bar staff changed shifts because they'd run out of certain ales. And another group of the lads had gone off on a boat, Peter Johnson and Doug Ellis. Doug Ellis being the Aston Villa chairman, Peter Johnson of Tranmere. And they'd had a party there. But anyway, we're sitting there about 5 in the afternoon, and suddenly this sodden figure emerges into the bar that we're saying. It's Paul Gascoigne, who had dived off the boat and swum ashore about half a mile and came and joined us. And then he got bored, and some of the waiters on this complex used to have bicycles, to come and bring drinks to bars that were a bit far away from the main bar. Gascoigne decided he wanted to get back to the hotel, stole a bike, and went missing for 3 hours until he was recovered in a hedge. That was a World Cup.
This kind of leads on, I think, very nicely from that, because it kind of answers itself in a way. But I mean, how has football journalism changed since those days? Because it has changed an awful lot, as in fact has football, as in fact has society.
Yeah. It's changed a hell of a lot. I mean, you would never have that scenario at all, would you? At a World Cup, 3 journalists sharing a few lagers with the England captain, 3 other England players. It just wouldn't happen. There was a code of honour. There was less journalists, there was less TV, there was less intrusion, and
not,
yet
not
having
24/7,
it wasn't 24/7. Having said that, some of the pressures were just as high, and they went into a tournament with these difficult stories and awkward relationships. A lot of technology has made the job easier, but in some ways it's made it harder. It's altered an awful lot. It's not the same as it was, and what is, but I don't. The enjoyment has gone out of it, and I think the enjoyment of a lot of the game has gone. A lot of Chelsea fans I know of my age, kind of a little bit, it's bizarre, isn't it? Careful what you wish for. You yearn for the success, and then all that kind of stuff. But sometimes they're a little bit. They feel a bit alienated, disenfranchised from what it used to be like. I remember used to go in after Friday. Sometimes the players would train at the bridge, and then afterwards just go over to Stamford Arms and play pool and a little bit of wind down in the afternoon. Not necessarily on the ale, but you'd end up playing snooker with Kerry Dixon. And you could have been walking down there and you could touch and feel them. Now they've got security guards around them and helicopters to get from A to B.
It's not the same, is it?
No.
But hey-ho,
But it's not all down. There's some great football out there, wonderful football. Let's not forget that there were days when the mud was so bad at the bridge that West Ham would beat you 4-0.
Yeah, so it never happened now, would it?
No, it would, exactly, never. It will
Mind
never
you,
happen.
one of my favourite...
It did actually happen, 86.
I know,
Frank
we lost
McAvenny.
to QPR. Basically, we were on course for possibly winning the league that year.
You denied West Ham the league that season. Pat Nevin at Upton Park.
True
so
enough.
There you go, you got your own back.
True enough. I do remember a match, actually, not in recent history, when we played Charlton at home, and we'd basically put sand all on the pitch, because it was before the days when they sorted out the water table there, and we were basically playing on a sand pit, and Kirbishley and Charlton absolutely went mental about it, and we played some of the best football I've ever seen, and we absolutely cuffed them. I think it was 4-0, wasn't it?
4-1.
4-1.
3 after half an hour.
So, you know, harks back to the old days a bit.
Not so much a fond story of the Bridge, but it must be about 15, 16 years ago. Before the season started, Ken Bates used to have a pre-season lunch with a few of the press. Anyway, it would have been August, very hot day, in the East Stand, get in the lift, 6 of us get stuck with Ken Bates in a lift.
Do you know what?
For an hour. The fire brigade had to be called. I am not kidding you.
I'm amazed. I mean, the only thing I can think of worse than that is to be stuck in a lift with Darren Mantle for 5 hours. That would, you've seen that Peter Sellers film, The Pink Panther? Very much like that with Darren. But, Rob, moving on, because right now I know you're doing quite a few things, but one of the things you're doing is you're writing a Sunday column for the Daily Mail online.
Yes, indeed. Yeah.
You've got some very interesting views about Wan Matter from what I was reading yesterday. Are you brave enough to air them on this show?
I certainly am. I never doubted it. The information is that if Marino's preferred 3-man attacking scenario is Willian, Hazard, and Oscar. And I think it's only a matter of time before Juan Mata, your player of the season, possibly pun, obviously. We'll get a bit fed up, and
you think he might be Oski?
I don't think he's first choice. The word is things change in football. 2 players could get injured. You don't know, but he's at the moment, from what we're hearing, he's not first choice. He's not dynamic enough in Jose Mourinho's world.
But, okay, can I ask you this directly? I mean, is that because what you're hearing from very, very good sources?
Yes.
Hang on, is that what you're hearing from very, very good sources, or is it just people who think they're in the know, adding 2 and 2 and making 5? Because hang on, they all presume that Jose likes a physical player. Who, they used to have a go at Joe Cole for the same thing. When actually we've been saying for weeks and weeks and weeks. Well, he managed to be quite happy with Modric, who never tracks back, and Ozil, who never tracks back, and who are also very small and slight. So a lot of us are saying, it's all baloney.
It's a very good question, and it goes back almost to the question you asked about how has journalism changed. The fact is, there's so much social media. There's so many people. There's more Chinese whispers than ever before. Where in the old days we were more able to get to the horse's mouth, to speak to a player, to get an opinion or a manager. It's all too much of it stage managed now, and you only get to often told what they want you to hear. But some of us, through circuitous routes sometimes, not always the most obvious, still have a line in to people at the club, protagonists, players even. And, that's what we're hearing at the moment, or that's what I'm hearing from someone I would trust implicitly. Someone who told me, around Christmas time, as you well know, that Marino would be coming back to Chelsea. I don't profess to know everything that goes on at the club, but that's what I'm hearing at the moment.
Well, Lampard, you knew about the Galaxy.
Frank Lampard was going to LA Galaxy. He was on his way. The contract was almost signed. By March, Marino knew he was coming back just before, and he got on to Frank, constantly texting him, "Don't go, don't go." You got him for another season. So sometimes these things will eventually come out in the wash. But the Matter thing, I know it sounds crazy. I don't say this is the other thing people have to understand. When you write something, it doesn't mean you always agree with it. You're just saying what.
You're the messenger, so don't shoot the messenger.
Yeah, I've got a few bullet holes, but hey ho.
But you're still like paint your wagon, mate. You're still rolling along.
So we try to. I'd just like to mention one thing, and I've also got a website.
Well, I'm about to talk about Bobby. If that's
okay,
what
that's fine.
Say, I mean, Rob.
Yeah, ask a question.
You're not buying the fitness injury line that's being fed out, because obviously a lot of Chelsea fans don't like the idea that
I'm not going to contradict that, but it smells to me of PR spin. That and don't forget, there's a lot of things that are said by clubs, to send out what they, cover stories, if you want. I mean, let's not go too far into it because it's embarrassing for most Chelsea fans. The whole Clattenburg thing last season was a PR disaster, wasn't it? Yeah. And it should never have got to that point, because at one point they were saying, one thing, and clearly it wasn't true. And that's not Chelsea, just Chelsea.
So you're saying everything about it you think was all made up?
What?
About the Clattenburg thing with Ramirez hearing things?
I really don't. I think it's too complicated.
It is very complicated.
Complicated to go into.
I want to talk about retro a bit further back than last year.
Yeah.
Because you and I love our retro football.
Yeah.
Probably because we are considerably older than everybody else around this table.
There is an element of that.
That kind of does, it goes, one goes right there. But you see this thing up here,
okay.
Bobby FC is your latest creation, Rob. Can you tell us all about Bobby FC?
Yeah, Bobby FC is, why is it called Bobby? Because back in the day everybody had a Bobby. Bobby Moore, Bobby Charlton, Bobby Tambling. Let's not forget. So
I have to interrupt you there because I remember, because I'm kind of trying to work with you a little bit on this, and I remember you said to me, it's called Bobby FC.
Yes.
And I said, mate, that sounds like a blooming girls' magazine.
Yeah.
And you said, no, sharp chidge, it's not. He said, and you said, Bobby Moore, Bobby Charlton.
Yeah.
And I said, well, I still think it sounds like a girls' magazine. He said, well, Bobby Tambling. I said, that's a great name.
That's right. And it's just a generic name. I mean, it's a bit like, I don't know. It's it was a girls' magazine called Jackie. It's just to give it an
Jackie
identity.
Charlton, it's all right,
Jackie
mate.
Charlton. You don't want to
Jackie
say
Milburn.
Retro football is just a bit boring. So the idea is to give it a bit of personality. It also is an app. It's interactive. You get live old footage. It's also about the here and now. So
that you talked about the Frank and the Galaxy contract in there. So you've actually got some really high quality articles in there about modern day football as well as what's happening.
Well, Frank hopefully he's going to be an occasional columnist with us, and his dad, because this is like a lads and dads magazine. It's for the over 40s, but everybody's welcome. And you see that the Vialli story there is basically we did everything's meant to be linked to now, but it goes back in the past. It's not all back in the day. And there will be an app, and there's also going to be a quarterly magazine, eventually a TV station. Vialli, for instance, transfer deadline day. It wasn't, in fact, deadline hadn't happened at that time, but I did it on the back of Willian being hijacked by Chelsea. When Vialli signed for Chelsea in '96, I was working for the Daily Mail. The day before he signed, our Scottish office insisted he was going to Rangers, and there was a ridiculous row. And we had the story in London that he was going to Chelsea, and in fact, the following day, he signed for Chelsea. And probably if you really wanted to sort of get, when Chelsea moved into the new wave of what it's become, that period perhaps you could identify when Gullit took over from Hoddle, and suddenly instead of buying players that were past their sell-by date from abroad, you actually got a player pretty much in his prime, wasn't it, Vialli?
He just won the European Cup, hasn't he?
Exactly, and then Zola came, and it all started to snowball from there. So, football is about DNA, and football is the present is much about the past, and it's all part and parcel. And hopefully, younger people will take to
it. I think they will, because you do need to have a context of where you are now, and the best way to do that in football is to look at what happened before.
We've got music and fashion in there as well, which is quite a
bit. The youth
and sideburns,
and sideburns.
Well, that's the style section. There's loads of stuff there. And we've got you can't really scroll up there, but we've got an unbelievable picture of Bobby Moore actually singing with the Equals, which was Eddie Grant's back in the late.
Bro, I checked that out. It's brilliant.
Hey, Viva Bobby Jones. Right. But of course, everybody's saying Viva Bobby
Moore. We got to go into a break in a minute, Rob. So very quickly, it's bobbyfc.com.
www.bobbyfc.com.
And it really is, people, well worth checking out, and I hope to be involved
Everybody
in some
can be a member
well.
of the Bobby FC football.
Exactly. Now, very quickly, in 10 seconds, are you actually, Rob, I have to ask you this, are you a Chelsea supporter, a closet Chelsea supporter? I don't buy the West Ham thing.
In the playground in 1970, for about a month and a half, I was Peter Bonetti and Alan Hudson. That was the fantastic.
You got 10 seconds.
We were Chelsea, they were Leeds, and we won.
That's
I
good
came
enough
back
for me.
After the summer, and we were Brazil.
Your underpants are blue, really. I knew it. Anyway,
blue is the colour.
After the break, we won't be talking pants because it's my favourite bit of the show. It is Lauren's Loan Report.